Welcome, dear friend, to this quiet haven we have prepared for you. It is a truly heartening thing that you have chosen to spend a little of your precious time with us. For this gentle story is woven with the softest threads, designed to tenderly soothe your mind and help guide you toward the peaceful shores of restful sleep. We hope that as the tale unfolds, like moss softening ancient stone, you will find a deep and comforting calm settling upon you. And so, just before you settle in and allow the stillness of this place to gently enfold you, if you find comfort and warmth within this unfolding narrative, we would be ever so glad if you would like this story and subscribe to our channel so that we might continue to share more such deeply relaxing moments of peace together. Now, let us begin our journey. Chapter 1, The First Green Blush. The morning arrived not with a clamor, but with a slow brightening, a gentle dilution of the night's deep ink. Agnes Willowbrook sat on the small flagstone patio just outside her kitchen door, a familiar earthenware mug warming her hands. Steam rose from the dark surface of her tea, carrying the faint, comforting aroma of bergamot into the cool, damp air. Spring had breathed onto the world overnight, leaving behind a sheen of dew on every surface, turning the small enclosed garden into a place of quiet sparkle. Her gaze drifted downwards towards the short flight of stone steps that led from the patio to the lawn below. They were old steps, weathered by countless seasons, their edges softened, their surfaces marked by time. It was there, on the shaded riser of the second step, that she first noticed it properly this year, a faint, almost luminous green blush against the cool gray stone. Moss, not the thick cushion of summer, but the tentative beginnings, a delicate pioneering spread. Agnes leaned forward slightly, her eyes tracing the intricate velvet-like patch. It looked impossibly soft, a living film clinging with quiet tenacity. The air around her was still, filled only with the distant, polite chirping of a waking sparrow and the almost inaudible sigh of the breeze through the new leaves of the lilac bush near the fence. She took a slow sip of her tea, the warmth spreading through her chest, a comforting counterpoint to the morning's chill. She remembered these steps from when she first moved into this small house decades ago. They had seemed merely functional then, a simple transition from one level to another. But time and her own shifting perspective had imbued them with a quiet significance. They marked a boundary, a gentle descent into the green seclusion of the garden, her personal patch of tranquility. Now, this nascent moss seemed like a secret being whispered by the stone, a promise of returning life after the gray dormancy of winter. Agnes felt a familiar sense of peace settle over her, the kind that came not from grand events, but from small, quiet observations. Setting her mug down carefully on the cool flagstone beside her, she rose slowly, her joints making small creaks that were as familiar as the garden sounds. She walked to the edge of the patio and knelt, not quite touching the steps, but bringing her face closer to the patch of green. Seen up close, it wasn't a uniform color, but a tapestry of varying shades, from deep forest green to a lighter, almost yellow hue, where the sunlight filtering through the awakening branches overhead managed to touch it. Tiny, intricate structures like miniature trees composed the whole. She imagined the microscopic life teeming within it, a hidden world thriving in the damp coolness. The scent of wet earth rose from the ground, clean and elemental. She stayed there for a long while, simply looking. There was no need to do anything, only to witness this slow, quiet unfurling. The sun climbed higher, burned off the dew from the upper leaves, but the steps remained mostly in shade, preserving their moist coolness, ideal conditions for this gentle colonization. Agnes felt the slight dampness from the flagstones seep through the knees of her trousers, a cool grounding sensation. She noticed the way the mortar between the stones had crumbled slightly over the years, creating miniature valleys where water pooled and tiny fragments of fallen leaves collected, further sustenance for the spreading moss. This simple act of looking, of paying attention, felt like a conversation without words. The moss, the stone, the light, the air, they were all part of a slow unfolding story. And she was privileged to be a quiet reader. She thought of her years spent in the archives, handling brittle paper, deciphering faded ink, piecing together fragments of the past. This felt similar, yet different. Here the story was alive, growing, changing with the subtle shifts of weather and season. It demanded a different kind of attention, a softer focus, an appreciation for the present moment in all its quiet detail. A robin landed briefly on the top step, head cocked, observing her with a bright, curious eye before flitting away toward the bird feeder hanging from the old apple tree. The small intrusion didn't break the spell. It merely added another layer to the gentle morning tableau. Agnes smiled softly. She rose again, feeling the familiar comfort in her limbs, and retrieved her now lukewarm tea. Standing at the top of the steps, she looked down at the spreading green, a quiet promise held in a cool stone embrace. It was enough. This gentle beginning was enough. The day stretched before her, calm and unhurried, anchored by this small green observation. Chapter 2. Summer's Verdant Cushion. Summer had settled into the garden like a contented sigh. The tentative green blush Agnes had watched in spring had fulfilled its promise, transforming the stone steps into a soft, undulating carpet of deep emerald and jade. The moss, fed by sunlight filtered through the now dense leaf canopy and occasional summer showers, had thickened into a luxurious cushion, muffling the hard edges of the weathered stone beneath. Agnes found herself drawn to the steps often during the long, warm afternoons, seeking the cool relief they offered even in the heat. Today, she sat on the third step down, the lowest one fully embraced by the moss, her sketchbook resting open on her lap. The air was warm and still, heavy with the mingled scents of blooming lavender from the nearby border and the sweet fragrance of honeysuckle climbing the weathered fence. The distant drone of a lawnmower somewhere in the neighborhood provided a low, sleepy hum, a background note to the garden's closer symphony, the busy buzzing of bees, exploring the purple lavender spikes, the occasional soft rustle of leaves as a gentle breeze stirred the upper branches, the almost silent flutter of a cabbage-white butterfly dancing among the flower heads. Agnes let these sounds wash over her, requiring nothing, simply noticing their presence. She ran her fingertips lightly over the moss beside her. It felt cool and surprisingly dense, springing back slightly under her touch. It wasn't uniformly smooth. There were subtle variations in texture, some patches finer and more velvety, others coarser, composed of larger, more distinct plantlets. She tried to capture this variation in her sketch, using soft, overlapping pencil strokes, focusing not on perfect representation, but on conveying the feeling of softness, the way it seemed to flow over the contours of the stone. Her breathing slowed, falling into rhythm with the gentle movements of her hand across the page. The warmth of the day wasn't oppressive here in the shade. Sunlight filtered through the leaves overhead, creating a dappled pattern on the steps and the moss, shifting slowly as the sun traversed the sky. Agnes watched these moving patches of light, mesmerized by their slow dance. They highlighted different areas of the moss, revealing hidden nuances of color, bright yellow-green where the light struck directly, deep-shadowed green in the miniature crevices. It was like watching a slow, silent film projected onto the steps. She felt a sense of deep peace, a quiet joy bubbling up from simply being present in this small, beautiful moment. She leaned back slightly, resting her shoulders against the step above, feeling the coolness of the stone through the thin fabric of her summer dress. The moss beneath her felt soft and supportive. Closing her eyes for a moment, she focused on the sounds and smells around her, the bees' industrious hum, the sweet perfume of the flowers, the faint, clean scent of the moss itself, mingled with the warm earthiness of the garden. She felt grounded, connected to this small patch of earth, the worries and complexities of the wider world seeming distant and unimportant. Here, there was only the warmth, the scent, the texture, the gentle sounds. Opening her eyes again, her gaze fell upon a ladybug making its slow, deliberate journey across a patch of moss near her foot. Its bright red shell was a startling contrast against the deep green. Agnes watched its progress, a tiny explorer navigating a vast, verdant landscape. It paused, antennae twitching, before continuing its unhurried exploration. Such small dramas unfolded constantly here, unnoticed, unless one took the time to look. It reminded her of the magnifying glass she sometimes brought out, revealing the hidden complexities within the mossy world. Tiny insects, intricate spore capsules like miniature lanterns, glistening droplets of dew held captive among the strands. She picked up her pencil again, adding a few more strokes to her sketch, trying to capture the way the moss rounded the edge of the step, softening the sharp line of the stone. It was a satisfying process, this quiet translation of observation onto paper. It wasn't about creating a masterpiece, but about deepening her own appreciation, noticing more keenly the details she might otherwise overlook. The familiar weight of the sketchbook in her lap, the smooth texture of the paper under her hand, the faint rasp of the pencil, these too were part of the comforting ritual. The afternoon wore on, the shadows lengthening subtly. The quality of the light began to change, growing warmer, softer, signaling the slow approach of evening. Agnes felt no need to rush. She lingered on the steps, absorbing the tranquility of the moment. The moss, cool and soft beneath her, seemed to hold the stillness of the garden. It was a testament to patience, to resilience, to the quiet beauty that could flourish in overlooked corners. She closed her sketchbook gently, placing it beside her, content to simply sit and be, enveloped by the verdant cushion of summer on the old stone step. Chapter 3, Autumn Leaves and Damp Earth. Autumn arrived not with a sudden chill, but as a slow exhale, releasing the vibrant greens of summer into warmer, earthier tones. The air held a new crispness, especially in the mornings and evenings, and carried the faint, melancholic scent of decay, not unpleasant, but rich and complex, the the smell of leaves returning to the soil. Agnes stood at the top of the mossy steps, holding a soft, bristled brush, surveying the scene below. The steps themselves were still predominantly green, the moss clinging resiliently, but they were now adorned with fallen leaves, scattered like jewels in shades of gold, russet, and deep burgundy. A sycamore leaf, larger than her hand and patterned in yellow and brown, lay draped across the second step, its points curling slightly. Smaller oval beech leaves dotted the mossy surface like scattered coins. They formed fleeting, beautiful collages against the green backdrop, temporary art created by the wind and the slow release of the trees. Agnes felt a familiar pang of gentle sadness that always accompanied this season, a recognition of the cycle of letting go, but it was tempered with appreciation for the transient beauty. She raised the brush, its bristles soft and pliable, perfect for the task. Slowly, carefully, she began to sweep. Her movements were deliberate, mindful of the living carpet beneath the leaves. She didn't want to tear or dislodge the moss, only to clear the surface debris. The brush whispered against the stone edges and sighed softly as it moved across the mossy patches, lifting the leaves gently. Each stroke was a small act of care, a quiet tending. The repetitive motion was soothing, rhythmic. Sweep, gather, pause, sweep, gather, pause. She focused on the feel of the wooden handle, smooth and familiar in her hands, the slight resistance as the bristles moved through the damp leaves. The scent of damp earth intensified as she worked, mingling with the sharper, sweeter smell of the decaying foliage. A light mist hung in the air, softening the edges of the garden, muting the colors slightly, making the silence feel deeper, more profound. The only sounds were the whisper of her brush, the occasional soft thud of an acorn falling from the oak tree in the neighboring garden, and the distant call of a crow. It felt like the world was holding its breath, pausing before the deeper quiet of winter. Agnes breathed in the cool, moist air, feeling it cleanse her lungs, invigorating her senses, despite the somber beauty of the scene. She worked her way down the steps, bending slightly, her body accustomed to this gentle task. The leaves collected at the bottom in a colorful pile, waiting to be gathered later for the compost heap. Looking back up the cleared steps, the vibrant green of the moss seemed even more striking now, a testament to its quiet endurance against the changing season. Droplets of mist clung to the individual strands, catching the soft, diffused light like tiny pearls. It looked refreshed, breathing freely again. Agnes felt a quiet satisfaction, the simple pleasure of restoring order, of caring for this small corner of her world. She sat down on the now cleared bottom step, resting the brush beside her. The stone felt cool and slightly damp through her trousers. She reached out and touched the moss, its texture still soft and yielding, though perhaps less springy than in the height of summer. It felt cool and alive beneath her fingertips. She noticed how the colors seemed deeper now, more saturated in the damp air, ranging from a rich bottle green to almost black in the deepest crevices between the stones. It was a different kind of beauty than the bright exuberance of summer, more subtle, more introspective. A gust of wind rustled the remaining leaves on the trees overhead, sending a fresh scattering of gold and brown fluttering down onto the steps she had just cleared. Agnes watched them fall, a gentle, inevitable cascade. She didn't feel frustration, only acceptance. This was the rhythm of autumn. Her work was temporary, a brief moment of clarity before nature continued its slow, beautiful process of decay and return. There was peace in accepting that impermanence, in finding beauty not just in the pristine state, but in the process of change itself. She remained seated for a while longer, simply observing. The light began to fade subtly as the afternoon wore on, the mist thickening slightly, blurring the lines between the garden and the world beyond the fence. The air grew cooler, prompting her to pull her cardigan tighter around her shoulders. The scent of damp earth and leaves persisted, a comforting, elemental perfume. Soon would be time to go inside, perhaps make a pot of tea, watch the twilight gather from the window. But for now, she savored these last moments of quiet communion with the steps, the moss, and the gentle melancholy of the autumn garden. The whisper of the brush seemed to linger in the still air, a memory of quiet care. Chapter 4. Frost's Delicate Lace. Winter had arrived quietly, not with heavy snow, but with a series of clear, cold nights that left the garden sparkling under a brittle layer of frost. Agnes stood at her kitchen window, looking out onto the transformed scene, a mug of steaming tea warming her cupped hands. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long, pale blue shadows across the lawn, and the low light caught the frost, making every surface glitter as if dusted with diamonds. Her gaze, as always, was drawn to the stone steps. They were barely recognizable. The familiar green cushion of moss was now encased in a delicate, intricate tracery of white ice crystals. Each tiny strand, each miniature leaflet was perfectly outlined in frost, creating a complex three-dimensional lace. It was breathtakingly beautiful, fragile, and temporary. The hard lines of the stone steps beneath were softened, blurred by this ethereal coating. It looked like a landscape from a fairy tale sculpted by the cold breath of the night. The silence outside seemed amplified by the frost, the usual garden sounds muffled, absorbed by the crystalline layer. Agnes took a slow sip of her tea, the warmth a welcome contrast to the view outside. The steam fogged the window pane slightly, and she wiped it clear with her sleeve, reluctant to miss any detail of the fleeting spectacle. She could see individual ice needles sparkling on the tips of the moss, catching the pale sunlight. Where shadows lay, the frost had a softer, bluer quality. It was a study in light and texture, constantly shifting as the sun climbed fractionally higher in the winter sky. She felt a sense of quiet wonder, the kind that often accompanied these unexpected natural transformations. She considered putting on her warm coat and boots to go outside, to see it up close, perhaps even touch the frosted moss gently. But there was a unique pleasure in observing from the warmth and comfort of a kitchen. The window acted like a frame, isolating the scene, making it seem even more like a carefully composed painting. She could appreciate the visual beauty without disturbing the delicate stillness, without leaving footprints in the frosted grass or breathing warm air onto the intricate ice formations. It felt like respecting a moment of perfect, frozen calm. Inside, the only sounds were the gentle ticking of the old clock on the mantelpiece and the occasional soft clink of her mug against the countertop. Outside, the world seemed held in a state of suspended animation. Even the bare branches of the apple tree, etched against the pale sky, seemed frozen mid-gesture. Agnes noticed how the frost highlighted the texture of the tree bark, the roughness of the weathered fence panels, details often overlooked. Winter in its starkness, revealed the underlying structure of things. She let her gaze rest on the steps again. The moss, hidden beneath its icy cloak, was dormant but alive, waiting patiently for the return of milder temperatures. Its resilience was comforting. Even encased in ice, it held the promise of green renewal. Agnes thought about the cycle of the seasons she had witnessed just on these few steps: the tentative blush of spring, the lush cushion of summer, the leaf-strewn beauty of autumn, and now this crystalline stillness of winter. Each phase had its own quiet charm, its own lessons in observation and acceptance. As the sun rose higher, its light gained a little strength, touching the frosted surfaces with a hint of gold. The delicate ice crystals began to glitter even more intensely, preparing for their inevitable melt. Agnes knew this perfect scene wouldn't last long. Soon, droplets of water would begin to form. The lace would dissolve, and the deep green of the moss would reappear, damp and refreshed. This transience was part of its beauty. It encouraged appreciation of the present moment, the understanding that such perfect stillness was rare and precious. She finished her tea, the warmth lingering in her hands. The image of the frost-covered steps remained vivid in her mind's eye. It was a picture of quiet endurance, of beauty found in the harshest conditions. She felt a sense of deep calm, a quiet gratitude for the simple ability to witness such things from her window, to find wonder in the ordinary patterns of weather and season playing out in her own small garden. The day ahead felt peaceful, imbued with the silent sparkle of the frosted morning. The kettle clicked off, ready for a refill, another small, comforting sound in the quiet house. Chapter 5. The Promise in the Thaw. The grip of winter had loosened almost imperceptibly at first, a slight softening in the air, a change in the quality of the light, the distant sound of dripping water replacing the stark silence of frost. Now, a mild southerly breeze whispered through the garden, carrying the scent of damp earth and the promise of change. Patches of the lawn, previously hidden under lingering snow or frost, were reappearing in shades of muddy brown and resilient green. Agnes stood on the patio, breathing in the gentle air, feeling a lightness that hadn't been there just weeks before. Her eyes sought the stone steps. The last remnants of winter's icy grip were melting away under the pale, watery sunlight. Small rivulets of water trickled down the stone risers, washing away accumulated dust and debris. And where the ice and snow had retreated, the moss was revealed, looking startlingly, vividly green against the dark, damp stone. It wasn't the thick, uniform cushion of summer, perhaps a little flattened and subdued after the weight of winter, but its color spoke of life, of quiet endurance. Seeing it again, uncovered and vibrant, filled Agnes with a gentle sense of hope and renewal. She walked carefully to the edge of the patio and descended the top 2 steps, her shoes making soft sounds on the wet stone. Reaching the first significant patch of moss, she knelt down, just as she had done in the spring, though the air now held a different promise, not of beginnings, but of continuation. She touched the moss lightly. It was cool and saturated with meltwater, feeling denser, heavier than she remembered. Water beaded on its surface, catching the light like tiny scattered lenses. Despite the dormancy forced upon it by the cold, it had survived, holding on to its potential for growth. Looking closely, she could already see signs of subtle change. Perhaps it was just the way the light fell, or the moisture plumping the tiny structures, but the green seemed richer, deeper. She imagined the life stirring within it, awakening slowly as the soil warmed and the days lengthened. Around the edges of the steps, tiny shoots of other plants were pushing through the soil, the determined points of snowdrops, the first hints of crocus leaves. The entire garden seemed poised on the brink of awakening, and the moss on the steps felt like the heart of this quiet resurgence. Agnes stayed there for a while, absorbed in the details. The sound of dripping water from the eaves of the house and the nearby trees formed a gentle, irregular rhythm. A blackbird landed on the lawn nearby, probing the softening earth for worms, its movements quick and purposeful. The air felt clean and washed, carrying the earthy scent of the thaw. She felt the dampness seep slightly through her knees again, a familiar sensation that connected her physically to the changing season, grounding her in the present moment. She thought back over the years she had spent observing these steps, the first delicate blush of green, the lush summer growth, the scattering of autumn leaves, the sparkling frost, and now this resilient reappearance. It felt like completing a cycle, a quiet journey marked not by distance traveled, but by attentive observation. Each season had brought its own unique beauty, its own subtle shifts in texture, color, and mood. And through it all, the steps and the moss had simply endured, changing slowly, quietly, embodying a kind of peaceful persistence. This simple act of watching, of tending in the small ways, had become a deep source of comfort and stability for Agnes. In a world that often felt hurried and chaotic, this small corner of her garden offered a different rhythm, slow, patient, cyclical. It reminded her to appreciate the small wonders, the beauty hidden in plain sight, the profound peace that could be found in simply noticing. The moss, softening the hard edges of the stone, felt like a metaphor for how mindfulness could soften the hard edges of life. Rising slowly, Agnes felt a sense of quiet contentment. The promise held in the thawing garden wasn't loud or dramatic. It was gentle, steady, reliable. It was the promise of continuity, of life's quiet insistence. She walked back up the steps, leaving the moss to soak in the weak sunlight and the nourishing meltwater. Back in her kitchen, she put the kettle on, the familiar ritual marking the transition. As she waited for the water to boil, she looked out the window again at the damp green steps. They seemed to glow softly in the afternoon light, a quiet testament to the enduring beauty of the ordinary and the deep, simple peace found in watching the world slowly turn.